A Fine Passion, Book 3. The last of his line, Jack Barron Warnefleet has fled London after nearly being compromised into marrying a dreadful female. Turning his back on the entire notion of marriage, he rides home to the estate he has not seen in years, determined to set in motion an alternative course of action. Early May, Avening Village, Gloucestershire. Apple blossoms in springtime. Julius Jack Warnefleet, Baron Warnefleet of Minchinbury, reined in on the rise above Aveling Valley and looked down on the pink and white clouds surrounding Avening Manor. His first sight of his home in 7 years. Could he have felt more apt? Apple blossoms always reminded him of brides. Regarding the blossoms with a jaundiced eye, he twitched the reins and set his gray gelding Challenger ambling down the long hill. Everything, it seemed, was conspiring to remind him of his failure, of the fact that he hadn't found a bride yet. Jack had spent the last 13 years fighting for king and country, almost entirely behind enemy lines in France. His father's death 7 years before had brought him briefly home, but only for 2 days, just long enough for the funeral and to formally place the running of Avening in the hands of old Griggs, his father's steward, before he had to slip back over the channel, back to the varied roles he played in disrupting French shipping and commercial links, draining the lifeblood from the French state, weakening it. Not the sort of battles most people imagined a major in the Guards engaged in. But the wars were now over. Along with his colleagues, Jack had retired from the fray and turned his mind to picking up the reins of civilian life. The previous October, he and his 6 colleagues, all gentlemen blessed with the title, wealth, and the consequent responsibilities, and therefore all sorely in need of wives, had banded together to form the Bastion Club. Here are the members of the Bastion Club. Let's see. Okay. The Bastion Club, their bulwark against the matchmakers of the ton, their castle from which each would sally forth to do battle with society's dragons and secure the fair maid he required. That at least had been their plan. Matters, however, hadn't fallen out quite as they supposed. Tristan Weyas had stumbled across his bride while overseeing the refurbishment of the house that now holds the Bastion Club. Shortly thereafter, Tony Blake had even more literally stumbled across his bride along with a dead body. Charles St. Austell, fleeing the capital, and 2 helpful female relatives had found his bride haunting his ancestral home. And now Jack was fleeing the capital too, but not because of female relatives. The rattle of a carriage wheels reached him, though the screening drifts he glimpsed a black carriage bowling along the road from Charrington. The carriage crossed the junction with the Teatbury Lane, down which Jack was descending, and continued towards Nailsworth. Jack wondered who the carriage belonged to, but he had been away so long he had no idea who might be visiting whom these days. His mother had been the daughter of an earl, and his father the grandson of a duke, an eccentric spinster. Great Aunt Sophie had been a twig somewhere in his paternal family tree. Her hobby had been amassing wealth, although Jack could only recall meeting her briefly twice on her death 2 years ago. Great Aunt Sophie had willed him a sizable portion of her amassed wealth. By the time he returned to England, various decisions associated with that inheritance had grown urgent. Learning about his new holdings and investment had imperative. He duly suppressed a deep-seated longing to return to Avening to reassure himself it was all as he remembered. And after all these years, after all he had to do, witness and endure, his home was still here as he remembered it, and instead had devoted the last 6 months to coming to grips with his inheritance, wielding the whole into one able estate. Although he now earned numerous elegant country houses, to him Avening was still the centerpiece, the place that was home, the place that held his heart. That's why he was here, slowly ambling down the lane, letting his jaded senses absorb the achingly familiar sights and sounds, letting this soothe his abated temper, his less than contented mood, and dull but persistent ache in his head. Temper and mood were due to his failure to find a suitable bride. He'd accepted he should had bitten the bullet while in London organizing his inheritance. He had applied himself to looking over the field. Once the season had commenced, he assumed suitable ladies would be thick on the ground. Wasn't that what the marriage mart was all about? Instead, he discovered that while sweet and not so sweet young ladies littered the pavements, parks, and ballrooms, the sort of lady he could imagine marrying had been nowhere to be found. He would have said he was too old and too finicky, yet he was only 34, prime matrimonial material for a gentleman, and he had no physical preference in women. Short, tall, blonde, or brunette were all the same to him. It was being female that counted. Soft, perfumed skin, feminine curves, and once they were beneath him, those beauty little grasps falling from luscious parted lips, he should have been easy to please. Instead, he discovered he couldn't bear the company of young ladies for longer than 5 minutes. Beyond that, he grew so bored he had difficulty remembering their names. He was good at escaping, or so he thought, until he met Miss Lydia Cowley and her gorgon of an aunt. Miss Cowley was the daughter of a wealthy industrialist, her aunt distantly connected to some Midland peers. Jack had found little Miss Cowley to interest him. He, however, had been of great interest to Miss Cowley and her aunt. They tried to entrap him. His mind elsewhere, he hadn't sensed the danger until it was upon him. But the instant he had, his well-honed instincts had sprung to life. The same instincts that had kept him alive and undetected through 13 years of living with the enemy. They thought they had cornered him alone with Miss Crawley in a first floor parlor. Yet her aunt had swept in with Lady Carmichael in the role of unwitting witness by her side. The parlor had been devoid of life. Put out, confused, the aunt had retreated, looking to look elsewhere for her errant niece. She hadn't looked out on the narrow ledge outside the parlor window. She hadn't seen Jack holding Miss Crawley locked against him, her eyes staring above the hand he clapped over her lips. He held her there silently and deadly, precariously balanced 2 floors above the basement area until the parlor door had closed and the retreating footsteps died. Then he opened the window, swung her inside, and released her. One wide-eyed look into her face, and she hadn't been able to get out of the parlor fast enough. He hadn't tried to hide his understanding of what had happened or his reaction to that and her. She stumbled through a garbled excuse and fled. He canceled all further social engagements and retreated to the club to brood over his situation. But then Desile had sent word that Charles needed assistance in Cornwall. The information had seemed a godsend. He finished dealing with his inheritance, and he decided he was also finished with searching for a wife. In the company with Gervase Tregarth, another club member, he'd ridden away from London, back to a world he understood. He stayed at the club for a few more days, finaling business that headed down to Cornwall for Charles's wedding. That had been 2 days ago. Leaving the wedding breakfast, he'd ridden across Dartmoor to Exeter. Then the next day, he had taken the road to Bristol, where he rested last night. Early in the morning, he set out the long country lanes on the last leg of his journey home. It had been 7 years since he set eyes on the limestone facade of the manor and watched the westering sun paint it in gold. He knew just where to look to glimpse the manor's gables through the trees lining the lane and intervening orchards. The scent of apple blossoms reached him, for all it meant bride, it also meant home. His heart lifted, his lips listed too. As he reached the junction of the Tedbury Lane and the Nailsworth Charenton Road, to his left lay the village proper. He turned Challenger to the right, head rising. He touched his head to the horse's heels and flanks and cantered down the road. He rounded the bend, heart lifting with anticipation. A little way ahead, a Pantheon lay overturned by the side of the road. The horses, trapped in the traces, panicked and ungovernable, attempted to rear, paying no attention to the lady clinging to its bridle, trying to calm it. Jack took in the scene in one glance. Face hardening, he dug in his heels, urging Challenger into a gallop. Jack ducked, but the iron shot grazed his head and exactly the spot he had been crushed. He swore then, and he bit his lip, blinking against the pain. Weaving to avoid being butted, he grabbed the horse's bridle above the bit, exerted enough strength to let the animal know he was in the hands of someone who knew, and started talking, crooning the horse that all danger had passed. The young bay stamped it too, shook its head. Jack hung on and kept talking. Gradually the horse quieted. Jack shot a glance at the lady. Riding up, all he'd seen was her back. That she had a wealth of dark mahogany hair, worn an elegantly paint-plated and coiled chiffon. Was wearing a plum-colored walking dress and uncommonly tall. Jack blinked. She looked like she wanted to rend him limb from limb, metaphorically at least, and every intention of doing so soon. He would have looked again more closely, but the horse she'd skidded. He refocused his attention and crooned some more. Is he conscious? Jack asked about the driver. No, he's trapped, his legs broken and possibly one arm. Once the horse is calm, you'll have to help me get him out. To Jack's relief, her voice showed no hint of agitation, much less hysteria. I can't let the horse go. He's too nervous, but he's calmed enough for you to hold. Come and take the reins. I'll get the driver out. Don't be asinine. You can't lift the carriage and get him out at the same time. Just take the reins and leave him getting out to me. He offered the reins he gathered to her. Unharness the horse. Her words were clipped order. If he panics again, he won't be able to hold him, and if he drags the carriage, he'll harm the driver more. Or worse, you'll drop the carriage after you've listed it. Jack grabbed one. Here, take the reins and walk him forward. I'll hold the poles steady. If they fell, the driver's trapped limbs might be crushed even more. Grasping the reins, the lady went to the horse's head, caught its attention, then smooth-talking slowly urged the bay forward step by step. Jack took the weight of the poles as the harness loops slid off. With the horse free, the lady looked around. Jack glanced over his shoulder. Challenger had returned and stood cropping grass on the other side of the road. Tie him to the hedge near my horse. Jack bit his tongue again. She was the most aggravating female, and she didn't even speak. He rounded the side of the carriage and saw the driver. A young gentleman. He'd obviously done everything he could to save the horse and carriage, and had stayed on the box too long. The carriage had rolled on its side, then further pinning and cushioning one leg. Luckily, the slope of the ditch wasn't that steep. The carriage hadn't continued to rolling onto its hood, but had rocked back to settle on its side. It took a minute to identify the best points on the frame to grasp to lift. Positioning himself with his back to the carriage, half crouched, the edge of the lower ride resting on his hands, Jack glanced at the lady. She was watching him surprising silence and with grudgingly approval. When I lift, let the poles rise as they will. When we're sure the carriage is going to hold together and not break apart, come and help haul him out. She nodded. He straightened, lifted the side up to waist height. Then he braced, bent, heaved the carriage higher, and ducked his shoulders beneath the bones of the side. Bits of panel fell away, wood creaked and groaned, but the frame held. No! One shoulder's dislocated. Hook your hands under his armpits and drag him out. She stiffened at his tone, but did as he said. Although he couldn't see her face, Jack could imagine her expression. Shifting, he tried to ease the weight of the carriage onto one shoulder so he could reach down and help. Don't move, you idiot. I can manage. Jack stiffened as if she'd slapped him. She shot him a mutinous, distinct black glare, then shuffled back, tugging the man out from the carriage's shadow. His hearing was acute. He heard her muttering beneath her breath, I'm hardly a weak, fainting female, you dolt. Entirely unexpected, his lips kicked up at the ends. You can let it down now. She pulled the man onto the grass. Jack slowly let the carriage down, then followed. Frowning at the man's face, she dropped to her knees behind him. Do you know him? He's not from around here. Which meant she was, and that surprised him. She certainly hadn't been living in the vicinity 7 years ago. Funeral or not, he would have noticed her and remembered. He set about methodically checking the man for injuries, straightened limbs, nothing noting the breaks. Still frowning, she watched his hand. Do you know what you're doing? Yes. Her lips tightened, but she accepted the assurance. His assessment of the man's injuries had been largely correct. With one quick, expert jerk, he reset the shoulder, then using sections of beading broken off the carriage, used this and the man's cravats to tie the splint arm and bind it and the shoulder. That done, he turned to the leg, broken in two places. He had plenty of wood for splints. I don't suppose you consider sacrificing the flounce from your petticoat. Of course I will, and she rips. He bent to the task. She helped, working under the direction in silence. Yes, ma'am. Sandy, did you want to come up here? Sandy. Sandy. He briefly glanced at her face, closer now that they were both leaning over the man, distinctly aristocratic face too, as for the rest. Looking down, he forced his mind back to the man and his broken limb. Not easy, the distractions were manifold. She had the sort of figure commonly described as an armful. More words like voluptuous sprang to his mind, phrases like well endowed. Then he remembered her earlier scourging gaze and found the perfect adjective, Bodician. He finished tying off their impoverished bandages. The injured man was as comfortable as they could make him. Boadicea sat back with a small sigh. He dusted off his hands and held one out to her. Yes, ma'am. Do you want to come up here? Do you want to come up? Come here. Come here. Come here. You keep coming at me and tapping at my knee. Come here. Come here. Come here. Come here. Do you want to read the story? Do you want to read the story with me? Hmm? He just met the girl of his dreams and he doesn't know it yet. She doesn't know who he is yet. Don't you want to learn the story? Shall we look at the story? Um, The man was less than a quarter of a mile, about a quarter of a mile, most of it the long drive. Fetching Challenger, Jack hoped Griggs and his butler Howlett had kept the drive in good repair. Leading Challenger, he fell in beside Boadicea, who was coaxing the bay forward in an even, steady walk. The reins pulled taut, their stretcher eased into the lane, riding the dry, reasonable surface smoothly enough. Satisfied that they'd done all they could for the injured man, Jack turned his attention to his companion. No hat, no gloves, she had to live close by. Do you live here, thereabouts, at the rectory? James Atwood used to be rector here. He still is. No ring, no hint she'd ever worn one. He waited for her to elaborate if she didn't. How did you come to be on the road? I was in the field mushrooming. Again she waved to the left. There's an old oak on the knoll. There are always mushrooms there. Jack knew of it. I heard the accident, dropped my basket, and came racing down. My hat fell off somewhere. She didn't seem overly perturbed. A second later she slanted him again. Where are you headed? The manor. He looked ahead and saw nothing more. He felt her gaze, felt it sharpen, but hiding a grim grin, he refused to meet it. The two could play at withholding information. The wrought iron gates of the manor appeared on their right, flanked by oaks that had been ancient when Jack was born. As usual, the gates were propped wide. Together he and Boadicea guided the bay into a wide arc, towing the stretcher smoothly through the turn and on to the long rising drive. Jack looked around as they walked on. Most of the field within a mile were his, but these acres that stretched between the drive and the rushing stream, a tributary of the Frome, and the gardens around the house, played host to most of his childhood memories. He was aware of Boadicea was watching him. He could feel her gaze, uninhibitably curious. Are you expected? Not precisely. From the corner of his eye he caught her narrow-eyed glance, then she looked ahead and straightened her stride, leaving him to lead both horses. He let her go ahead, striding up the portico. She tugged the bell, halting the horses in the forecourt. Howlett opened the door. He immediately bowed. Lady Clarice. Lady Clarice! Then Howlett saw him. The smile broke across his butler's face was a welcome all its own. My lord, welcome home. So good to see you. Where you been? Where have you been? Do you want back up here? She's staring at me. I used to do these on the floor, but don't like it on the floor. Uh, Boadicea stepped back and slowly turning to face him. Howlett rushed out and then realized and had turned back to call the footman. Adam, who poked his head around the door. Go and tell Griggs and Miss Conmore his lordship's back. Jack smiled at Adam, who grinned and bobbed his head before racing back into the house. Howlett bowed, beaming before him. Jack thumbed him on the shoulder and asked if all was well. Howlett assured him all was. Then the gravel crouching beneath the Levenger gate hurled the arrival of Crabthroat, the head stableman known to all as Crawler. Rounding the house, he saw Jack, and his face split. Thought as it must be you. Too much carry on to be anyone else. Then Crawler saw Howlett examining the makeshift stretcher. What have we here? His Phantom overturned in the ditch. Crawler ambled across and bent over the injured man. Another young Larkin with more hair than wit, no doubt. After a cursory examination, he straightened. I'll send one of my lads to Dr. Willis. Do. Stepping back from the stretcher, Howlett remembered Boadicea. Lady Clarice! Howlett rushed back to her. I do apologize, my lady, but well, his lordship's come home at last, as you see. A smile softened Boadicia's face as she met Howlett's eyes. Yes, indeed, I do see. All righty then. My lord, you're back! Miss Conmore rushed out, followed slowly by his steward Griggs, leaning heavily on his cane. In the ensuing melee, Jack lost sight of his recent companion. He surrendered to Mrs. Conmore's wild hug and non-stop exclamations. He was instantly aware and seriously alarmed by Griggs' frailty. When had he grown so old? Perturbed, distracted, and deflected, the solicitous on to the unknown, still unconscious man, Miss Conmore and Howlett rose to the occasion and quickly organized the poor soul indoors and into a bed. Crawler took charge of both horses and assured Jack he'd send his lads to clear the wreckage from the road. Jack directed Adam to the traveling baggage as the crowd cleared. He was almost surprised to see Boadicea still standing by the front portico, still watching. He suspected still waiting to exact retribution. I'll be in shortly, Griggs. Jack smiled and took Griggs' arm to help him back to the house. Everything's in excellent order. I know I have you to thank. Oh, no, well, everyone here quite understood. I dare say your new responsibilities are quite onerous, but we're so glad you've come home. I couldn't stay away. Jack smiled as he said it, not his polished smile, but one of real feeling. He stepped back for the portico and urged Griggs to go in. I must speak with Lady Clarice. Oh, yes! Griggs halted. Please do excuse us, my lady. Of course, Griggs. Don't concern yourself. Her eyes lifted to meet Jack's eyes. The look in them stated very clearly that she had no intention of forgiving him so easily. He waited until Griggs had gone and the footman had shut the door before strolling the last few feet to her. You're Warnefleet. Not a question. Jack acknowledged the comment with an inclination of his head. But was it a loss at account for the condemnation statement clear in both her inflection and stance? And your Lady Clarice? Altwood. Jack frowned. Before he could ask, James is a cousin. I've been living at the rectory for nearly 7 years. Unmarried, living in the country? Lady Clarice Atwood who? My father was the Marquis of Melton. The information only intrigued him all the more, but he could hardly ask why she wasn't married and managing some ducal estate. Then he focused on her eyes and knew the answer. This lady was no sweet young thing, never had been. Thank you for the assistance with the gentleman. My people will handle things from here. I send word to the rectory when we know more. She held his gaze, brows light arching, considered him for a total unruffled moment, then said, I vaguely recall hearing, if you're Warnefleet, then you're the local magistrate. Is that correct? Yes, it's correct. In that case, perhaps a touch of fright in the dark eyes of her depth of her eyes. You need to understand what happened to that young man was no accident. He didn't overturn his Phantom. He was deliberately run off the road by another carriage. Are you sure? Yes. Clarice Adele Atwood folded her arms and sternly suppressed a shiver. Displaying the weakness had never been her style, and she'd be damned if she let WARNEFLEET, the too charming prodigal, see how unsettled she was. I didn't see the overturning itself. The noise of it is what brought me running, but when I reached the road, the other carriage had stopped, and the man driving had got down. He was approaching the driver, but then he heard my Pantheon and stopped. He looked up and saw me, stared at me for a moment, then he swung around, walked back to his carriage, climbed in, whipped up his horses, and drove away. She could still see the scene frozen in her mind, could still feel the menace exuding from that large, heavy male figure, feel the weight of his consideration while he debated. She blinked and refocused on the man before her, on his green-eyed and golden eyes. I take an oath the man in the carriage meant to murder, to finish off the gentleman in the Pantheon. Who wants the guy killed in the carriage? Will WARNEFLEET and Clarice become a love item? What will her cousin, the priest, think? He's still working there. You'll have to read the book to find out. We did start with the Lady Chosen, and we went on to a Gentleman's Honor, and then we did A Lady of His Own. Today we did book 4, A Fine Passion, with WARNEFLEET and his Clarice. They have to get to know each other. They have to find out what's going on, why they attempted to kill this guy. There will be several more accidents. There will be several more incidents in the book. There'll be a really good mystery. So it's not just a Regency romance. It's also a mystery, and that's one thing I really like about these books, is that there's a mystery too. We will follow it up next week with To Distraction and Beyond Seduction and Ouch! The Edge of Desire. And we will finally meet the mysterious Daziel. And then we will go back to doing some Sinsters. And we've still got the Black Cobra Club out there. And we've still got the Buccaneer Quartet out there. But we're going to do some Sinsters too. And if you could please hit the like and subscribe, I'd really appreciate it. Have a good night.